Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to the MMA Sucka Podcast. My name is Tim Wheaton, and joining me, as always, is the editor at MMA Sucka, Frazer Crone. Frazer, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, all good, mate. Thank you. We're just catching up our fare then. We've got plenty to get into from UFC 271. We've got a fairly lackluster card this weekend coming up, but there's in the world of boxing, there's been plenty going on as well. So touch on that. And obviously you've been very active on the site this week with more interviews from Glory fighters, It's just, it's like we're Glory's personal PR team, which I can't lie, I'm not mad about at all. I think it's great.
No, I think I think they've been switching more to this style that they're happy to do more interviews, especially for the English speaking world where they don't have as many fans as they do like in Europe, for example, because they switched recently to a pay-per-view model. So suddenly the stakes are a lot higher. So they've been playing very well with us. I think by the time Glory 80 comes around, which is in mid-March, we will have interviewed on MMA Sucka most of the card. Like the only people who I'm not interviewing is Kobayashi, who doesn't speak English, and Badahari, because he's Badahari. Other than that, I will have interviewed almost everyone. They're even hiring a translator so I can interview the Russian gentleman who's defending his title on the card as well. So we got a lot more Glory interviews to come. I've got like 4 sitting in the hopper that I'm just waiting to put out right now. But yeah, it's a lot going on. Glory PR, really good people to work with. Make sure to go buy the pay-per-view. Don't stream this one, guys. Go buy it because they've been nice to me. But yeah, so what's going on in the boxing world this weekend? Tell us everything.
Yeah, obviously, the weekend just passed. We had in the UK, we had Danny Jacobs and John Ryder. John Ryder didn't win that fight. I've watched the majority. You can watch the first 6 rounds and think, Danny Jacobs is just gonna do what Danny Jacobs does. He'll fade ever so slightly in the later rounds, but he would have done enough to bank enough rounds so that he gets his arm raised, and then he didn't. And the first 6 rounds, he was essentially 6-0 up, 10-9 every round, fairly convincing, and then he sort of fell off a cliff a little bit, but then he picked up enough rounds, I think, later on to have got his arm raised. But John Ryder, the hometown fighter, it was at Ali Pali in the UK, so he didn't win that fight. And now people are talking about a John Ryder versus Canelo fight. I don't need to see that. That does absolutely nothing for me, But luckily this weekend we've got the I'll be dropping a preview on MMA stuff. We've got a huge fight card this weekend. Amir Khan versus Kell Brook. Finally, it's about 10 years too late, but it is what it is. 2 British fighters fighting in Manchester, so there won't be any hometown bias, as it were. And this card has come too late. This fight has come too late. This fight should have happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But now both guys, it's a battle of what have these guys got left. They're not going to compete with world level. I'd argue they're not even the best welterweights in England at the moment, with Conor Benn coming through. But it is what it is. It'll be an entertaining fight. I watched The Gloves Are Off this morning. I'm in the middle of watching another preview at the moment. And, these, like I say, it is what it is, but it's far too late for the fight. I'm excited for the fight because, an all English sort of dust up to finally put an end to this rivalry. Further down the card, we've got Natasha Jonas, who's going for a world title. Hopefully she'll get the world title. She had the close fight with Katie Taylor. They should have rematched. We've got Vidal Riley back on the card. We've got the professional debut of Frazer Clark, who's obviously the Olympian. He competed in the Olympics last year, and now he's finally making his professional debut. Haven't got an opponent for him at the moment, but let's be honest, he's going to knock him out within the first 2 or 3 rounds and just get a bit of a move around. But throughout, I'm just looking at the card now. We've got it's a very good card. We've got Charlie Schofield versus Jermaine Brown for the English super middleweight title. Don't worry about the title that's on it, but that's a 17-1 prospect.
Yeah.
Fighting an 11-0 prospect. We've got an 8-0 prospect against another 11-0 prospect, and dotted out throughout the card. We'll breeze past the fact that we've got someone with a record of 2-73 on the card, because
what? When
Yeah,
did they?
that's just breeze past that. That's boxing all over for you, isn't it? You know,
I always say you
two and
should retire
73.
after 72 losses is more than enough for me, but this guy just keeps going.
In fairness, I'm looking at his record now. He's only got 5 KO losses in 73. So
pretty
you
good.
know
That's fine.
the guy can box. He's maybe doesn't get behind the jab, but yeah, you know, Amir Khan versus Kell Brook is really the standout this weekend for all things boxing. And you know, I could talk all day about the George Kambosos Jr. situation with, is it going to be Devin Haney? Is it going to be Lomachenko? But I won't bore you with that now. Like maybe a piece that we can write or we can talk about, you know, on a podcast where there's a lot less to talk about. But yeah, UFC 271 went down this weekend, and you know, I think we should jump straight into that because it was a massive event with a lot of talking points.
Yeah, this weekend's card, Hill versus Walker. That could be one of the worst fights in history, or one of the most average fights in history. I'm not going to say there's any other possibilities.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but stay tuned to the site. Amir Khan and Kell Brook will have. You're writing some previews for us.
Yeah.
Man, and you know what's great about the gloves are off? Every time I see promotions from other sports, real sports, for example, like covering the UFC has been such a man. Why couldn't we just cover real sports? You know what I mean? Like this stuff, like the gloves are off. This is great. Why doesn't the UFC do stuff like this? Why does it always feel like in the UFC we're covering so much of like this is now, this is what's happening now? Like this weekend we had a middleweight title fight, and I think you want to feel like you're a big part of history. And that's why we always talk about, is this guy the greatest? Because the UFC never says these guys are fighting for Anderson Silva's legacy. That would make it like put it in this frame of, wow, we're fighting as a part of our history. We're fighting for a legacy here. But instead they're like, no, these are the two guys. Don't worry about it. One of these guys is going to lose and then you can forget he even exists. That's why the UFC does promotion, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, this is, on paper, this was one of the biggest rematches in UFC history. And was it being billed like that? Absolutely not. You know, we've got a guy who, in Robert Whittaker, who in the first fight had never fought like that. We had never seen Robert Whittaker that built up with emotion almost, you know, and diving into shots and winging that big left hook from you know, almost behind him, winging it. And you know, we'd never seen that from Whittaker before. And yet Adesanya gets a knockout. Fine. That's good. That's great. The immediate rematch wasn't on the cards, and I'm not mad about that at all.
No, that's fine.
Did Whittaker deserve an immediate rematch? Probably. You know, he probably did deserve it after going, you know, 10 rounds with Yoel Romero.
Yes.
And, you know, going through the fight camp for Calvin Gastelum and having to pull out on the day of, or the day before. You know, he weighed in, they faced off, and he still couldn't make the fight. Did he deserve the rematch? Yeah. Yes, of course he did. We could see that that's not the Robert Whittaker that we're used to. But he didn't. He went back. He honed his craft. He beat Till. He dominated Cannonier. He dominated Calvin Gastelum. And then, you know, this is the whole sort of redemption story. Yeah, you know, I accept the fact that I lost. I've gone away. I've improved. I've built myself back up to be the number one contender. And it wasn't being built like one of the biggest rematches in UFC history. Yeah. Which it should have been. But, you know, that's the UFC's promotion all over, really. And to be honest, the fight kind of lived up to the way that the promotion, we were saying off air.
Yeah.
It's not one that you'd go back and watch. I mean, we would, because we like to analyze, you know, the scoring of it, the significant strikes, the game plans of both men ahead of the next fights. But would you go back and watch it as I've lost count the amount of times I've seen Israel Adesanya versus Calvin Gastelum, because every single time I still think that Izzy's going to get finished. And I still think, you know, I know the outcome. It goes 5 rounds, spoiler, but it goes 5 rounds and Izzy gets his hand raised. But that fight is constantly keeping you on the edge. This fight didn't, to be honest. I didn't think that Izzy was ever in any real great danger. But, you know, I've seen a lot online about the contentious scoring. How did you score it? I scored it 3-2 Adesanya.
Well, no, I completely co-sign on what you're saying with that. So we got the first round, and clearly Israel's in the lead. That was the most dominant round of the fight. We get the second round. Robert wins that round. However, going into the third, you don't feel like it's 1-1. You know, you just feel like, okay, Israel's going to pick it up from here. And even arguably Whittaker may have won round 4. It could be 2-2 going into the fifth. but you never feel like Robert's really in this fight. But yeah, same as you, I scored it 2-3 for Whittaker. Like he clearly won the second. I think he won maybe I want to say the fifth round that he probably won.
Yeah, see, I had it slightly different. I had 1, 2, and 3 for Adesanya, and then 4 and 5 for Whittaker. 5, I think 1 and 5 are well, they are. 1 is Israel's round, the dominance, the knockdown towards the end of the round.
Yeah.
I think 5, Whittaker did manage to get the takedown. Yeah. Massively controlled Izzy in that fifth round and just got off the better shots. But
yeah,
I think 2, 3, and 4, I think it's a story of what did Whittaker not do, as opposed to what did Adesanya do. Adesanya can fight at that sort of pace, at that range all day long. But Whittaker just didn't do enough. He didn't go relentlessly after the takedown. And, I wrote the keys to victory was a little bit of video analysis. Patience. Yes, we expected patience and we got patience in this one.
Mm-hmm.
But he was too patient. He only threw 21 strikes in the first round, landing just 9. And on someone like Israel Adesanya, if you're only landing 9, that includes sort of, your leg kicks and your jabs, it's not going to deter him at all. And Robert Whittaker needed to do that. So he needed to be patient, but he needed to still be aggressive enough so that he's got Israel Adesanya, having received 9 strikes and scored a knockdown in the first round, is going into the second round thinking this is going to go the exact same way as our first fight went. Yeah. And then we go into the sort of striking of Robert Whittaker. He's famous, Jacare, Calvin Gastelum, Darren Till, sort of a lazy jab, the straight, and then the high kick. We didn't see that once. We did not. It might have happened once or twice. I personally didn't sort of clock it. And why not? Why did Whittaker go away from that?
I think
that would have been.
Yeah, go ahead.
That would have been a tactic that I think could have potentially, troubled Adesanya, because you can go the 1-2 high kick, or you can go the 1-2 and then heavy low kick, because we know that Izzy sort of leans, rather than blocking strikes, he leans out of the way of strikes. All of his weight's on his feet because he's leaning from the hips backwards. If you smash that lower leg, it's going to deter his movement, and it's going to make his takedown defense, not so good, which his takedown defense, I think, was phenomenal in this one.
Well, yeah, there's a lot there, but I think Robert Whittaker in this fight was trying to answer the criticisms that he felt from the first fight, where he was so he would dash into the pocket and stay in the pocket. And in this fight, he would dash in and land the jab. And he landed the jab every time he was trying to do it. And he's still using the same dashing style, but he wouldn't stay in the pocket at all. So he would just dash in, land the jab, and then get out. The problem is that you can meet, he was answering his problematic extreme with a different extreme, and being in the middle actually would have been a little bit better. So sometimes dash in and land the jab, and then sometimes land the jab and then do a combo and then get out. The problem that he was just staying in the pocket and throwing winging hooks in their first fight, which isn't like him at all. Like, it was such a weird game plan looking back. He didn't fight like that after that. He didn't fight like that before that fight. But yeah, in this fight, I agree with you. Land that jab that he was landing consistently. He was pushing Israel's head back. And then why didn't you follow up with a low kick, a takedown attempt, a couple of more punches, a combination, and then get out and exit on, enter and exit on different lines? But it seems like, I don't know, he's just like stunned about Israel or something, because his takedowns attempts, I think his game plan was based around takedowns. Israel's takedown defense, this is the meta of modern fighters, is that strikers are so good at getting up now. They're not playing off their back. They are able to stand up. Even all those takedowns were successfully completed. Israel got up, no problem at all, right? Like, it was really impressive takedown defense.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's a difference between a Khabib style takedown when he gets you to the ground and you are not getting up unless he wants you to get up, and a Robert Whittaker takedown in this fight where he got Izzy down, but did he do any damage? Not really, until the fifth round, he had 1.5 minute control time. But in reality, that's not much in a 25 round fight. For the longest control time when your game plan is wrestling, to have 1.5 minutes or a little over 1.5 minutes isn't great, And just going through the rounds, obviously he shot for 2 takedowns in the first round, didn't get any control time, of course. You got 1 of 1 takedowns in the second, 52 seconds control time, but that includes pressing Izzy up against the fence, then maybe snatching the takedown. That's not 52 seconds of Izzy on his back with Whittaker, trying to improve his position. Then we had 30 seconds control time in the third, 40 seconds in the fourth, and then obviously the 1.5 minutes in the fifth, as we mentioned. But like I said, these aren't all control time of, he had a total control time of 3 minutes 40, but that isn't Israel Adesanya on his back for 3 minutes 40. That's Robert Whittaker being in the advantageous position for 3 minutes 40 of a 25-minute fight. That means that, 21 and a half minutes is he didn't have his back up against a cage, or he didn't have his back on the mat, and he was in open space where he could. No one's going to beat Israel Adesanya, I don't think, stood in open space with him. We saw even, the one person that we've seen beat him in Jan Blachowicz was losing the kickboxing fight in kickboxing range before he managed to sort of blast that double and use his size against Adesanya's size, and then dominated I say dominated, but he very much got the upper hand in the wrestling game.
Yeah.
But in open space, he was getting pieced up by Adesanya.
Yeah.
I think, I'll touch on what I said earlier, is Robert Whittaker just didn't do enough. Even in the fourth and fifth round, I think the knockdown in the first round was probably the worst thing that could have happened to him, because he looked like he was then tentative to even stand in front of Izzy at all. Like you said, throw a jab and stay in the pocket, maybe just for that extra second or extra half a second, so that you've got a little bit more power behind a potential, combination, the jab, even if you just land in a straight. If you're landing a straight backing up, of course, you're not going to hit it with as much power as if you're landing a straight when you're sort of got your feet planted. And having been dropped in the first round, and it was a fairly standard. It wasn't like it came from a strange angle, or it was easy hitting off the counter. It was just a straight, and it was a straight through the Whittaker's guard that put him on his backside, and clearly had an effect on Robert Whittaker to even debate staying in the pocket for that extra half a second. And I think that sort of set the tone for the fight for the next sort of 20 minutes of the fight.
Oh, absolutely. He looked tentative. Israel was using pressure and controlling the set. Like, he was using pressure, which is something he usually wouldn't bother doing. Usually he's the opposite. He lets guys kind of come at him a little bit. But in this fight, he was pushing Whittaker right up against the cage side. I mean, all we can really take away from this is, Israel is clearly the better fighter. I wouldn't get excited about a third fight. There's not much that Whittaker can show me. I think the problem is, he got dropped. He was on one foot when he got dropped. And like you said, it's just a clean punch. We're not having to throw power punches or power hooks. If you got a well-placed straight, a well-placed cross, that's all you need. This is what that game's about. It was trying to land your good punches. I think his entries are really the issue, because even when he's just trying to land the jab, he dashes in to land the jab and then get out. And like, this works really well against Yoel Romero, who, is willing to stand and trade with you, or is going to try to dash back. Israel takes a step back, and then we'll figure out what you're trying to do. After that point, it's going to try to counter that. Even when Whittaker was being pushed up against the cage, his entries were still dashing off the cage. I think that's the problem, is that he doesn't have any other openings, doesn't have a lot of other entries. He's doing the same entry time in, time out. And they're not bad entries they're not made for this opponent. That's what I'm trying to say, is that
for sure
it's not going to work. What do you think?
Yeah, because we saw in his fight directly after Adesanya, when he fought Darren Till, I think it was the first or second round, he rushed in, like you were just alluding to. He rushed in, Till caught him with an overhand elbow, dropped him and cut his head open. And then he was able to adapt by not bull rushing in straight away. He would sort of almost dummy and then go in. And that's where he learned his lesson. So I'm not quite sure why he didn't kind of learn his lesson in this fight. He learned his lesson in the Darren Till fight, that if I rush in, Till's going to throw the elbow and it's more than likely going to land. And we saw throughout that fight then, Till was looking to counter with the elbow every time Whittaker rushed in, which led to a lot of Whittaker's takedowns on Till, because Till was overextending with the elbow. Obviously, his weight was over his feet, and Whittaker was able to, one of the clips that I picked for my keys to victory for Robert Whittaker is Till overswung, Whittaker managed to duck underneath and then carry Till's momentum back to the cage, and then he was relentless in his pursuit of the takedown. We didn't get that against Adesanya, and whether that is just because Adesanya had the longer reach and was able to, Whittaker had to not only break the sort of first wall of getting past the Adesanya jab or the Adesanya sort of parry, but then had to go ever so slightly further into the clinch to try and get it to the ground. Maybe it's just a size issue for Whittaker. Let's be honest, he had fought at welterweight. Izzy's not making welterweight. I mean, nowadays Rob Whittaker's not making welterweight, but that's just because of his sheer size rather than his height. And maybe, like I say, maybe it is just a size issue for Whittaker. But what I thought was interesting, I don't know if you saw it online, about Michael Chandler. I think it was either an Instagram post or a tweet saying, come on, Izzy, you almost essentially alluding to, you're the champion. Show us what kind of a champion you are. Look, go out to finish the fight. I don't know what you thought about Chandler's comments on Israel Adesanya.
I mean, the honest answer is no. Like, this is a sport. This isn't entertainment. We're not asking Israel to, you gotta knock him out in 5 or you're not the champion anymore, or some dumb stuff like that. Like, no, he can cruise to a decision. George St-Pierre, I'm George's biggest fan. George St-Pierre did it for a whole career. You know what I mean? He's just cruising to a comfortable decision. That's what this sport is. You outpoint the guy by 1 point, by 1 punch, by 1 round, whatever, you won the fight. That's all that really matters. I think the problem is that it's stacked up of, like, there's a couple fights with Israel where you watch his highlight reel. This guy's a killer, and then you watch his last couple of fights, and you're like, "Oh, what's this guy doing? Can he not finish these guys?" Even you got the feeling of the Anderson Silva comparisons are so apt sometimes, because he beat the champion. He defended against 2 guys who those wins probably didn't age very well, Paulo Costa and Marvin Vettori, or Travis Lutter and Nate Marquardt. Like, in hindsight, those aren't that good of wins. Beat the former champion again, and then struggled to knock out a bunch of guys. And you're like, man, you're Anderson Silva, you're Israel Adesanya. Why are you struggling to knock guys out? Like, what is going on? But yeah, no, his job is to win fights. Honestly, Michael Chandler, I mean, he's got some of the best debut in UFC history. He's got a losing record in the UFC. If he was more cautious, he could win fights. What do you, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
what do you think?
Sure. I completely co-sign with, especially against, Robert Whittaker. We've seen Robert Whittaker knock people out, and clearly Adesanya felt the power of Whittaker, because we will have seen Adesanya put his foot on the pedal if he felt like he could get Whittaker out of there. But why put yourself in that danger when, although it's fighting, it's a mixed martial arts, it's a sport, it's also a business. Adesanya's in the Adesanya business. If he loses to Robert Whittaker and they have a third fight, he's the B-side in that fight. He's coming in not as a champion. He doesn't get the championship points, as it were. Of course, he'll get the pay-per-view points, but he doesn't get those points, that extra, however much it is, for entering the bout as a champion.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
And at the end of the day, why put yourself in that danger? But at the same time, he has got power. We know he's got power. He's finished a lot of his fights. He's finished the Derek Brunson fight was a good finish. Obviously, the Calvin Gastelum fight, although he didn't finish that fight, he knocked Gastelum down multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
Knock out Rob Whittaker and Paulo Costa, who'd never been even lost before, let alone been finished.
Yeah.
Now, the Yoel Romero fight, let's be honest, awful fight. So he got the decision, but I'm looking at the numbers now. 40 strikes.
Yeah.
Thrown by Romero, 48 strikes thrown by Adesanya. Taking into account that he knocked out Whittaker in the fight before that, he threw 40 strikes in that fight. So he threw 8 more strikes over about 17, 18 minutes.
Yeah.
Awful fight, And then he bounces back with a big knockout of Paulo Costa. He goes 25 minutes with Jan Blachowicz and obviously picks up the loss, but that kind of got, the asterisk next to it that it's at 205. But then he goes 25 minutes with Vettori. He goes 25 minutes with Whittaker. Let's be honest, Cannonier will be next for him. Does he finish Cannonier? I think Cannonier is sort of tailor-made for him. Because he's the kind of guy that will just walk forward and look to land big shots, and probably won't. And he doesn't have a great, wrestling game, Cannonier. He's got reasonable defensive wrestling, as we saw against Derek Brunson, but he was still taken down 3 times against Derek Brunson, Derek Brunson's kind of the elite. But, I'm just looking at Jared Cannonier has a takedown average of 0.23. He's not taking these guys down. Jared Cannonier hasn't, he was accredited with a takedown against Derek Brunson, which I don't personally remember, but before that his last takedown was in 2017. So
His last takedown was in 2017.
Exactly. This guy does not shoot for takedowns, which is, something that he could use. That was his last and only takedown in 2017. Just looking through now, his heavyweight career didn't land any takedowns. Didn't land any takedowns light heavyweight until he fought in 2017. And then he hasn't landed any takedowns until this fight with Derek Brunson, which I'll be honest, I don't remember him landing a takedown in the second round.
No, I don't.
Maybe.
Is that a knockdown that they included as a takedown or something? I don't know what they're talking about with that takedown.
To be honest, I can't remember. I've obviously watched the fight, I've watched the finish, but I don't remember the takedown coming. But that's how a striker like Cannonier, unfortunately, isn't going to trouble Adesanya, and is probably just going to play into Adesanya's wheelhouse of, you come to me and I will counter strike you for 25 minutes. Will he finish Derek Brunson? Jared Cannonier? I doubt it. I don't think, Cannonier is the kind of guy to be finished by Adesanya. But that's, for me, not a competitive fight. Jared Cannonier is good, but it was only 2 fights ago that he was dominated by Robert Whittaker. Had his eye bust, had his arm broken. And then we've just seen Robert Whittaker fairly dominated by Israel Adesanya. Yes, styles make fights, but this is a merry-go-round of middleweights. And Israel Adesanya is lapping these guys now. He's twice against Whittaker, once against Brunson, who, had he won, would have been next and probably would have beaten him twice against Vettori. Paulo Costa's no longer a middleweight. Anderson Silva's retired.
Oh, Costa's no longer a middleweight. He's not even a light heavyweight. No one knows what he's doing right
exactly, now. Yeah. Him and William Knight are on the same weight cutting program by the looks of it. And who else do we have? Calvin Gastelum won't be in a title shot anytime soon.
No.
So for me, Izzy will face Jared Cannonier next. Certainly. Which was alluded to at the post-fight presser from Izzy himself. He hinted at sort of June, July time. And then I think I don't want to see him then for another 8 to 10 months while he puts on some serious actual size and goes up to 205. Because that's the next move. That's the only move that makes sense for me. Because, he can do the GSP, well, not even GSP, because he went up in weight. You can do the DJ thing of just beating the same guy after the same guy after the same guy after the same guy in dominant fashion and not really ever being tested until he retires. Because I think, outside of, Robert Whittaker is the toughest fight for Izzy, and Robert Whittaker doesn't beat Izzy 9 times out of 10. No, so what makes you think that anyone else is going to beat Izzy, And, if he does take 8 to 10 months out and goes up to challenge either, let's say Glover Teixeira or Yujiri Prochazka, by the time that he goes up, one of those two will most likely be still and new holding the belt. That will also allow for the middleweight division to sort of figure itself out. Does Darren Till get back on the train? How well does Sean Strickland sort of come into the title picture? Question. Uriah Hall still sort of on the outside, which could be an entertaining fight. If Whittaker can put together 3 or 4 more wins, does Whittaker get back in there? Paulo Costa, if he sorts his diet out, does he, beat 3 or 4 guys? Marvin Vettori, we need to take Israel Adesanya and the middleweight championship out of the middleweight division, as ridiculous as it sounds, to let the division sort of materialize around a title picture. Because at the moment, yes, Jared Cannonier is the next available prospect, sort of title challenger, but he's won his last 2. But prior to that, he's only on a 2-fight winning streak, and I think he's only in the title picture because he hasn't faced Adesanya before. If he would have lost to Adesanya 3 or 4 fights ago, I don't think he'd be in the title picture, because arguably Sean Strickland is more deserving of a title shot because of the wins that he's got, because of the winning streak that he's got. But, it just doesn't carry over like that, unfortunately. So this is why I think Adesanya needs to take some time out of the division, go up to 205 to really define his legacy. He's not making 170 if his life depended on it. And allow Marvin Vettori, Paulo Costa, Sean Strickland. I mean, Jared Cannonier is obviously next, but Rob Whittaker, Darren Till, Uriah Hall. These are all good. Jack Hermansson still in around the sort of top 5 sort of gatekeeper category. We still got, Edmund Shabazian right on the outside. We got Imanov. These guys need to face each other, knock each other out of the sort of contention. And then we need to get 2 or 3 clear, right, this guy's the next guy. And then these 2 are fighting in a title eliminator. And then the winner of the title fights the winner of the, after Jared Cannonier, what's next for Israel Adesanya?
I know.
Because that's what we'll be talking about in June, July time.
Well, I think,
and
it's
isn't it?
It's a matter of storylines. That there's not a lot of storylines for this guy. And this fight should have had more storyline going in. This one had the best storyline that we've had in his career, arguably, but it just kind of fell flat. It was an uninteresting promotion, uninteresting hype, and then uninteresting fight. You just kind of beat him. Whereas we talk about you're kind of in the George St-Pierre position where you beat all these guys, but at least his storylines were kind of interesting of okay, now you're fighting Jake Shields, a Strikeforce champion. Now you're fighting Nick Diaz, a Strikeforce champion. Carlos Condit, he's an interim champion. Now you have to fight BJ Penn, he's the lightweight champion. So at least there was storylines. But with Israel, it's here's Marvin Vettori, he's a man who fights at middleweight. Here's Paulo Costa, he's a guy who just beat Yoel Romero. I guess cool. There's no, there hasn't been any storylines to really capitalize, really put that exclamation point on his career of I beat this guy. This was my crowning moment. But it's oh, okay. And he just keeps defending against pretty good fighters.
Exactly. And like you say, with GSP, it's Jake Shields, the sort of wrestling BJJ guy. Nick Diaz, the boxer with strong BJJ. Carlos Condit, a striker that we've never really seen before. Johnny Hendricks back in the day, he had strong wrestling base and heavy hands.
Yep.
You look at the middleweight division now, Robert Whittaker, striker with decent wrestling, but doesn't really use his wrestling.
And Whittaker's the good one in the division.
Exactly. Jared Cannonier, striker. Paulo Costa, striker. Marvin Vettori tries to be a wrestler but couldn't get Israel Adesanya down, so it turned himself into a striker. Darren Till, striker. Sean Strickland, striker. Uriah Hall, striker. Jack Hermansson, that herky-jerky style, tries to get it to the floor but couldn't even get Sean Strickland to the floor last fight. These are all strikers, and no striker is going to beat Israel Adesanya at 185. No. You have to have something else. You have to bring something else to the table, like size, like we saw again with Jan Blachowicz. And none of these guys beat Adesanya in a stand-up fight. So it's not really the comparisons between GSP and Adesanya are good, but the comparison of competition, as far as, like we say, facing a wrestler, facing a boxer with elite jiu-jitsu, facing a Carlos Condit style of striker who doesn't strike like anybody else. These are not the same caliber of guys as everybody's a striker in the middleweight division, and Israel's just on a different level to everybody else in that division.
It's true. Middleweight has been historically one of the more thin divisions in the UFC. At any given moment, you can look at middleweight and it's kind of weak. There was a short period between Anderson and Israel where you had Yoel, Bisping, you had Dan Henderson in the mix, you had Whittaker was bouncing around. Things were really interesting for a while, but now it's just man, you're telling me that the next title contender. So yeah, Jared Cannonier is not bad. He's a pretty good title contender. He has earned that position. He's on a win streak in the division with knockouts. He's well earned that. And then the next guy is going to be Sean Strickland or Uriah Hall. Man, close the division. Find something else for our guy to do. Because he's like you said, he's lapped these guys. He's beaten most of the top 10. If you add in Whittaker's record, they've beaten the top 10. The top 10 has been beaten already. There's no point in seeing these guys fight. But yeah, I think Uriah Hall, he's not going to get knocked out. Uriah Hall has the ability that when he's not winning, he'll go to second gear and he'll just cruise to a loss. He has no problem doing that. Sean Strickland is the opposite. When he's winning, he'll just cruise to a win. They're not even interesting, captivating fights of guys who maybe he has that one shot knockout power. Neither of those fights are interesting. Jared Cannonier is the most interesting fight.
Yeah, and we've got the Darren Till fight that could be interesting, but Darren Till was outstruck by Robert Whittaker, who was outstruck by Israel Adesanya, and like we always say, styles make fights.
Yes.
But when you're so convincingly outstruck by Robert Whittaker, and then Robert Whittaker is so convincingly outstruck by Israel Adesanya, you can pull the comparisons of both. And Till is on a losing streak at the moment. I think he's 0-2, 0-3 in his last He's 0-2 in his last two, and hasn't got a fight booked at the moment.
Yeah.
And we expect him to possibly headline UFC London. That didn't. Obviously, we know Tom Aspinall is headlining UFC London. So where does Darren Till go next? Paulo Costa doesn't really do an awful lot, because I'm pretty sure that that Dana said that Paulo Costa will have to fight at light heavyweight next. And does he drop down to fight a Brad Tavares, or a Kevin Holland, or a Chris Weidman? These are all guys in the top 15. But like you say, Jared Cannonier is the next. Marvin Vettori's been beat twice. Derek Brunson's been beat once. Sean Strickland's tailor-made for Israel, who's just going to walk forward on the center line and take shots.
That's
that
true,
also
yeah.
doesn't sell. That doesn't sell for me. Sean Strickland doesn't cross over into the mainstream. Paulo Costa is the 2-fight losing streak. Jack Hermansson on a losing run. Darren Till lost his last two. Uriah Hall lost his last one. Calvin Gastelum's way out of the title picture. He's already beat Brad Tavares. Imanov's, on the edge, but it's going to be 2 to 3 years before we see him or Andre Muniz in the top 5. Mm-hmm. Kevin Holland and Chris Weidman. It's a thin division where everyone is pretty much the same. There's not a guy other than Andre Muniz who's BJJ phenom, and we've got Chris Weidman who's a wrestler, I guess, but we also. He seemed in recent fights to prefer. But then we go on to talk about the co-main event with Tai Tuivasa and Derrick Lewis.
Okay.
Tai Tuivasa, they're all strikers. Tai Tuivasa's a striker, and I want to see him against everybody in the top 5. I want to see Tai Tuivasa fight as much and as often as possible. Not for his own health, because he's going to take a fair few digs, but I thought that was a great win. And I'm just looking at the rankings now. That one win has put him up 8 places in the rankings.
8th spot this guy climbed. He's places. This is Tai Tuivasa. People say heavyweights are a joke. No, Tai Tuivasa, he's a top 3. Man, you know what? If this fight took place outside the UFC, we'd be like, yeah, heavyweights outside the top 15 aren't that good. Like, they're just brawling. They can't hold positions. They can't successfully complete takedowns. Nope, these were 2 guys in the UFC's top 5. Get the hell out of here. Cancel this division. I'm sick of heavyweight. Let these guys do steroids, or don't let them fight at all. There's no point in this division anymore. Tai Tuivasa is a top 3. Get out of here. But
I'm here for it. The knockout itself I thought is a brilliant knockout. The short elbow clearly hurt Derrick Lewis, and then he landed another one to come over the top and send Lewis tumbling to the canvas. And does Tai Tuivasa beat Francis Ngannou? No. Cyril Gane outpoints him over 25 minutes.
Easy.
Stipe Miocic, no. Curtis Blades, probably not.
Probably not.
Alexander Volkov could probably keep him on the edge of his strikes. He definitely doesn't beat Tom Aspinall, because Tom Aspinall's the future. But
that's right.
And yet I want to see all of those fights. I want to see Tai versus Tom Aspinall. I want to see Tai versus Cyril Gane, because Cyril Gane can outpoint Tai Tuivasa over 24.5 minutes. And then Tai Tuivasa can land a huge overhand right and knock Cyril Gane out, just like we saw against Derrick Lewis. He can knock Stipe Miocic out. He could probably knock Francis Ngannou out. He's up there. He's probably the second biggest hitter in the division behind the champion. We've seen Curtis Blades landed. Derrick Lewis landed some big shots on Tai Tuivasa once he'd got him down, and when he was getting back to his feet, they were big shots landed on Tai Tuivasa.
Yeah,
and he just didn't seem bothered. But we know Tai Tuivasa's sort of kryptonite is the wrestling. If you're being taken down by Derrick Lewis, it's a bit of a worry. He lost to Sergei Spivak, who hit a wrestling approach, and just going on Tai Tuivasa's takedown defense, 50%, which it's not too bad. But if you look at the guys that have taken him down,
that's it. Yeah, go ahead. It's been some favorable matchmaking, hasn't it?
For sure. And he's taken down twice by Derrick Lewis. He wasn't taken down by Augustus Sakai, who's not a wrestler. Greg Hardy, Harry Hunsucker, Stefan Struve, all of these guys aren't wrestlers. He's taken down 6 times by Sergey Spivak and twice by Blagoy Ivanov.
Sorry to say, Sergey Spivak's not that good of a fighter. I know he's ranked
Exactly,
and
you know.
stuff. He's not that good.
If you look at Sergey Spivak, most recently dominated by Tom Aspinall.
That's right.
And you know, he wasn't able to land a single strike on Tom Aspinall.
Future GOAT is what you're saying. The future Fedor, future.
You said it. You know, those words came out of your mouth. You know, but like I said, you know, I think next for Tai Tuivasa, it's fun as long as this winning run lasts. Next, I don't know. Do you put him in there with a Cyril Gane next, or do you put him in there? You know, he's not a big enough name to go in there with Stipe Miocic, in my opinion.
So here's the thing: of like, sometimes we talk about does like you'll see people online talking about like a Bellator, especially of like some of these fights fixed. No, you don't have to fix fights if you give someone favorable matchmaking. And Tai Tuivasa is an example of like, you don't have, this guy is a cool draw. He's a great little fun story. He's a fun guy in interviews. He's a fun guy in the fights. He's kind of like type of guy that the UFC likes. They like that Chris Lieben type that Tai Tuivasa likes. So we're going to try to push him as high as he can. He's not going to face any straight shooters because we know he loses to Junior Dos Santos. Okay. And old Junior Dos Santos still beats him. We're not going to fab him against any wrestlers. If we give him favorable matchmaking like Augusto Sakai and Greg Hardy, I mean, Lewis was actually a big challenge. This is actually still crazy. It was just a sloppy fight, but it's crazy that he beat Lewis. Lewis is a good fighter and hits hard. Lewis did takedowns. You can see Tuivasa going through the motions of a game plan with leg kicks and stuff like that. But no, we just swanged and banged, and his swangs were better than Lewis's bangs. And this fight, if you have him fight a couple more times, I'd actually still pick Tai Tuivasa. What's next for him? He doesn't beat any of these guys. What does he beat? Curtis? No, he's not beating Curtis Blazer, Stipe Miocic. He's not beating Gane or Ngannou. We don't even know what's going on with Ngannou. If you said, so Francis Ngannou leaves the organizations, he's done. He's just going to get beat up by Tyson Fury now. You're going to have to do Cyril Gane versus Tai Tuivasa as the next heavyweight champion. That is the way it is. That is just how it is. Those are the two top guys in this division. Throw this division in the garbage. Get the super heavyweights back.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's like you say, who do you put Tai Tuivasa up against next? Because Stipe Miocic needs a big fight coming off the loss to Ngannou. Still, I think it's trending towards the John Jones fight for Stipe. That'd
be great.
But you know, and then it has to be Cyril Gane, because Curtis Blades has got a fight. He's just beaten Derrick Lewis. Alexander Volkov's got a fight. Rosenstruik's got a fight. Daukaus has got a fight. Tybor's got a fight. Shamil's got a fight. Aspinall's got a fight. All of these guys are already booked. And then you don't drop him down as far as, you know, he's already beat Augusto Sakai at 12. He's lost to Blagoy Ivanov at 13. Walt Harris doesn't, you know, you don't drop someone with the sort of momentum of Tai Tuivasa, who's now ranked number 3. You don't drop him down to a number 14 to fight Walt Harris.
Yeah.
It will be Cyril Gane next.
Yeah.
And Cyril Gane probably outpoints him over 25 minutes, which is a shame. Because Tai Tuivasa, but with that being said, you know, Tai can't land on him. You know, there's no reason why Tai can't. We didn't think Tai could knock out Derrick Lewis, to be honest, and you know, he did. So like I say, it's fun while it lasts, but I think there's probably more people on the card that have championship material further down the card than Tai Tuivasa. But you know, I'm here for that as a co-main event. It was fun. It was horrible to see Derrick Lewis again losing in Houston.
Yeah,
but he just can't catch a break in his hometown, you know. But you know, it is what it is, I guess, for Derrick Lewis. He probably has one more fight against a much lower ranked guy and hangs up the gloves.
That's probably it. I mean, Stipe is the interesting one, but yeah, I don't entirely know what Derrick Lewis can't have much less. He's actually had a really long UFC career. He struggled in a few spots and mostly quite good. Derrick Lewis, and great guy, great send off. A couple more fights for him, and we'll see what he does. However, we got some big ones. We got Renato Moicano against Alexander Hernandez. This is what we were talking about. This is some good stuff. What did you think of the fight? What's the future of Moicano? And he's back in the win column now.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad that it got bumped up to the main card, because I think it was a main card fight beforehand, and last time out we saw him against Jai Herbert, and that was a good win.
Yep.
Because Jai Herbert, although he hadn't picked up a win in the UFC at that point, he's a solid fighter, Jai Herbert.
Yeah,
and,
he is.
That just sort of he's now 3-1 at lightweight, 3 submissions and a KO loss to Rafael Fiziev, which I'm sure he'll touch base on at the end of the pod. But this guy is a finisher, and his last few wins, Cub Swanson finish. He obviously down at featherweight, but he went the distance with Calvin Kattar. Then he finished Cub Swanson. He picked up 2 TKO losses, but then he moved up to lightweight. Adazovic finish, knocked out by Fiziev. Jai Herbert, rear naked choke. Alexander Hernandez, rear naked choke. He is a solid fighter. What you do with him next is you continue to sort of put him against these. Alexander Hernandez is not an easy fighter, and I think a good fight for him next would be Brad Riddell. Both lost to Fiziev. Brad Riddell's obviously, he's ranked number 14, and he's a fairly big name, Brad Riddell. We know what he's going to bring, and it'll be the sort of striker versus grappler. But we know that Moicano can strike. We know that Brad Riddell has great defensive wrestling. I thought it was a really good performance by Moicano.
Yeah, it was.
But with that being said, put him in the main event against a guy who picked up the unanimous decision victory just one fight before him in Bobby Green.
Bobby Green! Look at this guy.
Bobby Green is due a main event spot.
Yes.
He's won his last 2, but even in his last 3, he lost to Rafael Fiziev, but that was an entertaining fight. He was well beaten in that fight, but he was a fighter of the night, and he's getting better with age. Bobby Green, he's like a fine wine, he's 35 now, and he's getting better. He's been in the UFC since 2013. He went on a run of 4 fights without a win.
Yeah.
And then he's lost 2 back-to-back, then he's won 3 back-to-back, and he's unfortunately for him, he's a decision machine. He, aside from the Quinta knockout last time out in November, he hadn't finished a fight since 2013 when he finished James Krause. He was finished by Dustin Poirier in 2016, but then he's gone 15 minutes every time. Test him over 25 minutes. Yes, he's not going to be in title contention, because as soon as he comes up against anyone, as rude as it sounds, anyone of a really high level,
especially in that weight class, lightweight's good.
But exactly, but he's not ranked. Moicano's not ranked.
It's a good division.
I want to see Bobby Green versus Nate Diaz. I think that would be a great fight. Each man just going to stand there and bang and trash talk in there and do what they have to do, and put that as a main event, and it sells. It sells to the hardcore. It doesn't sell to the casual, because unfortunately the casual hasn't really heard of Bobby Green, but the hardcores have. And that fight against Nasrat Haqparast, that was a phenomenal display. I thought, Haqparast looking to bounce back after losing to Dan Hooker.
Yep. And
Bobby Green lands 188 significant strikes on him. Phenomenal performance. I thought it was really good. Haqparast is not an easy guy to dominate like Bobby Green did, and he dominated him. It's the most strikes that anyone's ever landed on Haqparast, and there's a little bit of needle between them at the weigh-ins, but I think that just is what it is. But it was a really good performance by Bobby Green, and I'm here for it.
And he's turned his career around. He's like fine wine. He's gotten better over time, but he reinvented his losing career, not by going more defensive. He went the opposite way. He became a much more aggressive counter striker, and that's what turned his career around. Most guys in MMA, when they turn their career around, they try to go more defensive, like what we've seen from Andrei Arlovski for 20 years now. But he went the opposite way. He's getting more aggressive. Bobby Green's is getting more fun in there. Yeah, him versus Nick or Nate Diaz would be fun. But like you said, different rules for the Diaz bros at this point in their careers, and blah blah blah. We'll move on from that one, because whatever. Andrei Arlovski is still in the UFC. Cool. Your girl, Casey O'Neill, close gutsy fight against the retiring Roxanne Modafferi. What a career Roxanne has had.
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. And we said last week we want to see Casey O'Neill tested, and Roxanne Modafferi was the perfect opponent to see Casey O'Neill tested, and she was. almost over 700 combined strikes, almost 800 combined strikes thrown. Casey O'Neill breaks the women's record and comes in at number 3 for the most significant strikes thrown, and landed in a 3-round fight behind Sean O'Malley. I think Nate Diaz when he fought Cowboy. And Casey O'Neill was taken down. She was landed on. She did have the black eye. She did have the bloody nose, but she was just relentless in her pursuit of landing hard and regularly on Roxanne Modafferi. And I'm surprised she didn't try to mix in a takedown against Roxanne Modafferi, because Roxanne was being beaten up and she was beginning to anticipate the strikes. She knew the strikes were coming, she just couldn't get out of the way of them. So why not dominate your opponent? I think Casey maybe could have finished it if she would have got Roxanne to the ground and managed to maybe work her way into a mount or a side control and land some strikes. There was talk on the broadcast that the fight should have been finished. The fight should have been stopped. I didn't agree with that. I thought Roxanne was just doing enough. She was landing on Casey, and that's about enough, as much as you can ask for to keep yourself in the fight. But 229 significant strikes landed on Roxanne Modafferi. I can't lie and say that I've watched every fight in her career, but I just assume that's probably the most strikes she's ever received certainly in a 3-round fight. And she's one of the pioneers of women's MMA, and I think it was a passing of the torch fight. But what worries me as a fan of Casey O'Neill is if someone like Roxanne Modafferi lands on you with that much sort of regularity, you've got no chance against the more elite strikers in the division.
Yeah, and Roxy's never been a banger, has she? She's never been a striker. She is a take a person down. She's almost like a catch wrestling kind of like just move to position, look for subs, land some ground and pound. She's like she's very much that Josh Barnett type kind of thing, right?
For sure, yeah. And she's always been awkward with her striking. She's never looked smooth. She never looked fluid. She always looks like she's tensed up in the shoulders and she's throwing, but she's managed. It works. Clearly it works, because she's had a long career. And, she's had multiple fights on a losing streak. And yes, she went out of this fight. She came into this fight on the back of two losses. She's had 46 MMA fights, and she's only been finished once by knockout and finished 3 times by submission. And the knockout came, I can't even see it on her record, a knockout against Sarah Kaufman in Strikeforce in 2010. So she hasn't been knocked out since 2010.
Yeah, that's good. Who she reminds me of? Not because of their fight skill. Well, I guess maybe fight style a little bit, but Sakuraba, because both of them are held together just by knee braces, because nothing else is holding their body together.
Exactly. And she's just a pioneer of women's MMA. Everyone says the Ronda Rouseys, the Miesha Tates, Chris Cyborg, Gina Carano. Yes, these women were there, but Roxanne Modafferi was doing it before Ronda Rousey was doing judo. She was fighting mixed martial arts when it was cage fighting. She was fighting mixed martial arts before, when it had no rules. Head kicks and everything. Soccer kicks on the ground.
She fought NHB,
era. And Casey O'Neill is the new era. What's next for Casey O'Neill? Yeah. I think she needs to take a little bit of time off after that bout, because she's clearly got the eye injury, the bloody nose, and she needs to show up her defense ever so slightly, because she was never in danger of being stopped by Roxanne Modafferi. But like we say, if someone like Roxanne Modafferi can land on you with that regularity, Alexa Grasso, slick boxing, she dominates Cynthia Calvillo, and she probably dominates Jessica Rai in the stand-up game. But Andrea Lee, Joanne Wood, Calderwood, as we grown up with her, but Joanne Wood, Vivian Araujo, Talia Santos, Caitlin Chikagan, these girls probably beat Casey O'Neill in the stand-up game.
Yeah.
I think a good fight for her next would be Cynthia Calvillo. She's got the name. She's got not great stand-up. Both ladies are, not afraid to have a fight on the floor. or do you push her ever so slightly more? I'm not sure if Joanne Wood has got a fight booked at the moment. I seem to think she has, but if not, a Joanne Wood of an all Scottish fight, as it were,
That'd be great.
I'd sign up. Yeah, so Joanne Wood is fighting Alexa Grasso at the end of next month. So the winner of that, I think, fights Casey O'Neill. I think that would be a good fight. And
that'd be great.
What we saw from Casey O'Neill was kind of surprising in a way. Sort of heel turn on the mic, F you, don't boo me, and all this. But I'm here for it. Why not? You've got to make yourself stand out in a division where you've got a dominant champion in Valentina. So why not try and stand out by being don't go as far as Colby Covington, but be the heel. Say I don't need the fans. Say, F you to the fans, and, ruin the retirement fight of Roxy, which is, it was tough to see from, we're fans of Roxanne Modafferi, but this is a change in the guard. And, now you look down the women's flyweight division, you haven't got any of these sort of quote unquote veterans of the division anymore. You haven't got the Roxanne Modafferi's. You haven't got the Barb Honcheks that we used to have in ranked in these divisions. Even Jessica Penney is ranked in the strawweight division. I'd still call her a veteran because she's never going to be that championship quality, but she's not as far down as prospect is concerned. So, I think it is a changing of the guard, and I think it was a setup fight for Casey O'Neill. But we saw Macy Barber fail in her setup fight against Roxanne Modafferi. So, they're not built like Roxanne Modafferi anymore. I don't think that we'll get. I was thinking, I don't think we'll get women with a record of 26-20 still fighting in the UFC come 20 odd years away, because they're just not. People are too worried about their records these days, and you won't get someone like that. You're 26-20. If you look at that, if you hear that record just on the fly, that is not a great record. But then you look into the fights that she's had, of those 20 losses, she's only been finished 4 times. Roxanne Modafferi is, she probably won't hit the UFC Hall of Fame, but she should get at least an honorable mention in the UFC Hall of Fame.
Yeah, she's up there. There's that early stages of Sarah Kaufman's and Marloes Kunins and Roxanne Modafferi's where, we were just on the precipice of greatness, and these people were there blazing that trail. And Roxanne Modafferi, what a legacy! But so next for Casey O'Neill, it's funny at women's flyweight, like you said, the changing of the guard. Get some of these older people like Caitlin Chukagian, Lauren Murphy, Jennifer Maia. Get them out of the top 5. Let's get some of this new blood in there. There's some really interesting names at women's flyweight, and it's not those 3. Get those people out of there. We're done with this. Jessica Andrade, super cool. Love Jessica Andrade. She's actually an older one, but I don't know what weight class she's actually fighting in officially.
Yeah, she's fighting. She's headlining a strawweight.
Yeah,
she's headlining at strawweight in a few months or a few weeks. Yeah, okay.
Cool. Forget it. Whatever.
She never beats Valentina. She's too small to compete with Nunes or Pena.
Mm-hmm.
She's 1-on-1 with Rose at the moment, but she convincingly lost to Wiley Zhang. It is what it is.
She's floating around. But Chukagian, Murphy, Maia, get out of here. Get out of the way. Erdeheo, we got Calvillo, we got Joanne Calder. Like, we got some cooler people coming in. How about Fiorot? Manon Fiorot. Man, it's going to be a big year. I think women's flyweight, don't quote me on this, might become interesting. But don't quote me on that.
Sure.
A year from now, I'm probably wrong. What else should we cover off on UFC 271? We're not going to do any preview for next week because, man, that.
Yeah, next week's card's a strange one. I mean, I'm happy that the fight between Rafael, Dos Anjos and Fatigue still going ahead.
It's a great fight. I love that fight.
The only thing is, it just makes this card dicey, For me, I don't know. I know, obviously, Johnny Walker and Jamala Hill now headlining. I don't know if you've heard anything as to whether that'll be a 5-round headliner or a 3-round headliner.
Don't care at all. I wouldn't care either.
I'm not sure. Yeah, like I say, I'm not sure if it is a 3-round headliner or a 5-round headliner.
Apology says 5 rounds, and that's the only information I have. So we'll see these guys throw feints for a couple 25 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. And Kyle Darkus, I'm looking forward to seeing him back in. I'm glad that fight's that Jamie Pickett's taking it on short notice, and I'm glad that fight is at catch weight of 195.
Yeah.
Why make Jamie Pickett? He's sort of almost saving the fight. Saving the fight itself. Why make him struggle to get down to 185 when he's doing Kyle Darkus a favor essentially?
Yeah.
We've got a heavyweight fight on there between Parker Porter. Jim Miller's back in action.
Jim Miller.
Exciting middleweight fight between Joaquin Buckley and Abdul Razak Al Hassan.
That's the best one. That's the best fight on the card.
Yeah, and that's opening up the main card. That says all that you really need to know. We've got, I think there are some fighters that I'm interested in. Diana Balbita returning. Obviously she went 0-2 in the UFC before picking up a win against Hannah Goldie last time out. She looked very good. David Onama obviously took the fight against Mason Jones on short notice and looked very good in that fight. He took it on 4 days and looked really good.
Yeah.
And then for me, the standout on the undercard and the prelims is Jessica Rose Clark versus Stephanie Egger. I've got a piece coming out tomorrow on what to expect from Jessica Rose Clark, because on paper she's a striker, and then in her last fight she had over 11 minutes control time using takedowns, and she's a captivating personality. She's 2-0 now since she's 2-1 since returning to bantamweight. She lost to Pani Kanzad, and then she beat Sarah Alfar and Jocelyn Edwards last time out. I'm excited to see her back in action. I like watching Jessica Rose Clark fight. I like Jessica Rose Clark. I think she's great. And then
I bet you do.
Fighting.
I bet you do.
No, she's got that sort of that personality where she just doesn't really give a shit. It's nice, and it's I don't know if she still does, but she used to live out of a van, and it's it is what it is for Jessica Rose Clark. Will she ever make bantamweight contention? I doubt it, but she's facing Stephanie Egger, who I think is a step down in competition personally than Jocelyn Edwards. But she is absolutely. It is what it is. This fight night, and then luckily on next week's show we can talk a little bit about the fight night, a little bit about the boxing, and then we've got an interesting fight in Dariush versus Makachev to preview, and Arman Sarukian versus Joel Alvarez in 2 weeks' time. So, and we need a fight. We need those fights to come, because there are some dicey fights on this weekend's fight card, which I'll be honest, usually that means that these fights will be phenomenal. But
I'm not saying that. No, thank you.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, like you say, it's not a stay up in the middle of the night to watch fights. A catch up on Sunday morning. But like I said, I'm excited to see Kyle Darkus back in there. Obviously, that weird knockout or submit. I can't remember if it was a knockout or submission in the end of Kevin Holland, but there was a clash of heads that knocked Kevin Holland out. I think that led to, if I'm right, I think it led to a submission. But Kyle Darkus he's an entertaining fighter, and for him to be competing at 195 in the catch weight, I think is really good, because we don't want to see fighters, especially when they're sort of almost, like I say, almost doing the UFC a favor by stepping in. We don't want to see them have to kill themselves to get down to 185. That we saw William Knight; he was never going to make 205.
No, yeah.
So why even bother? Just tell the UFC, look, I'll step in, I'll take the fight, I'll save the fight card. I'm not making 185.
But that makes sense.
205. But it was ridiculous, and it was moved to heavyweight, and he lost. So,
but let me throw in with David Onama here. He's a guy that I think him and Mason Jones, very good fighters, futures of the division. So I think David Onama is definitely one to keep your eye on. Him fighting Mason Jones reminded me of a lot of like Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway. Like, these two guys fought on the undercard, and they were two future champions. Honestly, Mason Jones and David Onama, both guys to keep your eye on. Onama's fighting this weekend. I think he gets a pretty easy win here. I think that's an easy one for him. But he's one to keep your eye on, folks. Yeah,
for sure. And, like I say, he took his debut on 4 days' notice. He's actually had a camp for this one.
Yeah.
And he took it on 4 days' notice. He was unlucky not to get the win against Mason Jones, despite the fact I wanted Jones to win, the UK, the Welsh, I always wonder I'm always the hometown guy. David Onama taking that fight on 4 days' notice and still managed to go 15 hard minutes.
Yep.
And hurt Mason Jones. And like I say, he was unlucky not to get his hand raised in that one.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's probably, aside from, you know, Jessica Rose Clark and Joaquin Buckley and Al Hassan, that's probably the standout for me on the card, you know, because it's let's be honest, it's the proper UFC debut of David Onama, because you can't really judge a guy on 4 days' notice. And, you know, he's fighting at featherweight now, which is natural weight, where he fought Mason Jones. I believe that was at lightweight. So, you know, this is the debut of David Onama, which I'm for sure excited about.
I love it. Let's wrap it up and get out of here, folks. Probably got some other. For me, you can find myself at Tim Wheat MMA or on the MMA Sucka Instagram. Probably got some stuff coming up later in the week. I don't know. I can't keep track of this anymore. Frazer, what's going on in your life? You get the last word.
Yeah, so I've got that piece on Jessica Rose Clark coming out later on, probably tomorrow. I've finished it off this morning. I just need to read through it and make sure everything's working all right on that. We'll have the preview for the big Saturday night of boxing in the UK coming up. And then, of course, we'll have staff picks, results, previews going on throughout the week on MMASucka.com. Be sure to follow MMA Sucka on Instagram. Me and Tim are active on there, constantly promoting, you know, with polls and everything on the Instagram at the moment. It's really quite interactive. So yeah, be sure to follow MMA Sucka on Instagram as well.
Folks, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.